In the spring of 1975, a boy was lured by Michael Woodmansey, who brutally stabbed him with a kitchen knife. 7 years later, his bones and skull were found during a police investigation, leading the father on a desperate journey for revenge. Here are some of the craziest serial killer executions made by parents. Mary Ann Bachmeier's name became known worldwide in 1981, capturing the public's attention and shining a light on the complicated feelings of justice and revenge. Her story began with an unimaginable tragedy that would change her life forever and lead her to make a decision that shocked an entire nation. Born June 3, 1950, in a strict religious household in Sarstedt, a small town near Hildesheim in Lower Saxony, West Germany, Mary Ann's family had fled East Prussia after World War II, and life wasn't too easy for him. Her father was a former member of the Waffen-SS, an authoritarian with some serious drinking problems. Things took a darker turn after her parents' divorce, with her mother remarrying into an overbearing stepfather who eventually kicked Mary Ann out. And by the time she was 16, she would have her first child. But due to her difficult circumstances, she had to place the baby up for adoption. Life would continue to be a struggle, and at 18, she would become pregnant yet again. But the experience was traumatic, being raped just before giving birth. And like before, she had to put the child up for adoption. In 1972, Mary Ann's life seemed to be taking a better turn when she began dating a pub manager. By 22, she was pregnant again and gave birth to her third child, Anna, on November 14, 1972. This time, Mary Ann decided to raise her daughter on her own, and though she worked at a pub and often took Anna along, she would become her everything. As fate would have it though, tragedy was waiting around the corner. On May 5, 1980, Anna fought with her mother and angrily decided to skip school. That same day, she was kidnapped by Klaus Grabowski, a 35-year-old butcher she had visited before to play with his cats. He kept her at his house for several hours, where he molested her and then strangled her with a pair of his fiancé's tights. Afterward, he would tie her up and stuff her in a box, leaving her on the shore of a canal. It was only after his fiancée turned on him that he was arrested. Grabowski later claimed that Anna had threatened to extort money from him, saying she would tell her mother about the abuse. He said he killed her out of a fear of going back to prison. Mary Ann was absolutely devastated with this, and on March 6, 1981, during the third day of his trial, Mary Ann would smuggle a Beretta 70 pistol into the Lübeck District Court. She aimed the gun at Grabowski's back, fired 8 shots, 6 of which strike him, killing him almost instantly. Mary Ann lowers her gun and allows herself to be arrested without resistance. Mary Ann was put on trial for murder, where she openly stated that she had done it for Anna. She confessed to wanting to shoot him in the face and made it clear that her only motivation was her love for her daughter. Surprisingly, Mary Ann was given a lenient sentence of just 6 years in prison, and she would only serve 3 of that. Tragically, Mary Ann Bachmeier's life did end on September 17, 1996, when she passed away from pancreatic cancer at the age of 46. She's now laying next to her daughter Anna at Bergtor Cemetery in Lübeck.
1984, when authorities escorted 25-year-old Jeffrey Doucette through the Baton Rouge airport to face charges of kidnapping and sexual assault of a 12-year-old boy.
On March 16, 1984, Gary Plauché shocked the nation when he shot and killed his son's abductor, Jeffrey Doucette, at Baton Rouge Airport in Louisiana. And what makes this moment even more shocking is that it happened in front of a live TV crew, capturing everything on tape. The story's pretty dark and complicated, so let's unpack it step by step. Born November 10, 1945 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Gary Plauché was a father, fiercely protective of his family. At the time of the shooting, though, he was separated from his wife, June, and their 11-year-old son, Jody, had been taking karate lessons from a 25-year-old instructor named Jeffrey Doucette. But what Gary didn't know was that Doucette had been sexually abusing Jody for over a year. Jody started making excuses to skip karate class, but like most parents, Gary and June thought he was just being lazy and insisted that he'd keep going. How could they have known what Doucette was capable of? On February 14, 1984, Doucette did the unthinkable. He kidnapped little Jody, took the boy on a bus from Port Arthur, Texas, to Los Angeles, and checked into a motel in Anaheim, California. There, Duce molested and held him for 10 agonizing days, making Jody's parents desperate to the extent that a nationwide search was launched. Now, for some unknown reason, Duce eventually lets Jody call his mother, which unknowingly gives the police the clue they needed. Authorities track that call, locate the motel, and rescue Jody while arresting Duce. But this ordeal was far from over. News reports soon revealed the horrifying details of Jody's abuse, including claims of Duce assaulting him with a broomstick. The revelations enraged Gary, who made up his mind to confront Duce. By the 16th of March 1984, while Duce was extradited towards Louisiana, Gary would wait at the Baton Rouge airport, well-positioned near the payphones, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses to stay unnoticed. Meanwhile, he'd been tipped by a local TV station employee about Duce's arrival. As Duce, in handcuffs, walked past Gary, who appeared to be on a call, Gary pulled out a revolver and fired a single shot to the side of Duce's head at point-blank range. Duce drops instantly and dies from his injuries. This entire incident was caught on camera. Gary didn't resist. The officers knew him and were disheartened that he let his rage take over. In court, Gary received a suspended sentence of 7 years, along with 5 years of probation and 300 hours of community service. He completed that sentence in 1989. Sadly, though, Gary Plauché passed away in 2014, 3 weeks after his 69th birthday. To this day, his actions divide opinion. Some argue he went too far, while others see him as the father avenging his son in the only way he knew how. It's really hard to imagine the anguish of a father whose daughter was kidnapped and killed by a cartel, even after he paid a ransom. But Eduardo Gallo took matters into his own hands to ensure justice was served. It all goes down in July 2000, when 25-year-old Paula Gallo was hanging out with her friends at her family's weekend home, and out of nowhere, a group of attackers scale a fence, break in, and terrorize everyone for 2 hours. They made off with jewelry, clothes, 2 cars, and Paula. The area, known for attracting the rich and wealthy, had already seen 7 kidnappings recently, but no arrests had been made. Days later, Eduardo got the dreaded call for ransom. The kidnappers demanded $18,500, around 3 million pesos. But knowing his daughter's life was on the line, Eduardo didn't hesitate to pay. But something unexpected happened after he handed over the money. There was nothing, no word, no Paula. A week later, 3 suspects are arrested. But it's too late now. Paula's body was discovered near the ransom drop-off spot, shot twice in the neck and back. Disturbingly, the ransom money was found right next to her, untouched. Things get worse. The police seemed almost uninterested in solving this case, and Eduardo was restless. One of the stolen cars was recovered, but officers refused to run forensics on it, claiming the rain had ruined the evidence. And then Paula's clothing disappeared. Oh, and police denied finding fingerprints in the house. Eduardo realized he couldn't count on him to find his daughter's killers. He became more determined, had closed his consulting business, and turned into one hell of a private eye. Despite trying to work with law enforcement, it was clear they had given up on the case, so Eduardo dug in himself. Using his connections, he accessed classified call logs and locations tied to the suspects. His persistence would lead him to a key piece of evidence: calls from a payphone in Tultitlan, Mexico, linked to one of the suspects. With this intel, Eduardo pressures the police to act. They follow the lead and arrest 28-year-old Francisco Zamora Arellano, who confessed to Paula's murder. It took Eduardo an entire year to uncover what the police failed to do. However, he had to say this while reflecting on that ordeal in this interview, saying, "What a shame that it had to be me, a neophyte in criminal investigation, who had to carry out the investigation, and that the State Attorney General's Office of Morelos limited itself to evaluating and checking the validity of my discoveries." This goes to show that sometimes, in some cases, justice requires relentless determination.
I do intend, if this man is released anywhere in my vicinity or if I can find him after the fact, I do intend to kill this man.
A parent's worst nightmare is confirmed by a gruesome discovery. In the quiet confines of a teenager's bedroom, a human skull is found. For any parent, the mere thought of such a revelation is enough to freeze the heart and unravel the soul. This would be the chilling reality of John Foreman. In 1975, John Foreman became publicly known following the tragic murder of his son, Jason Foreman. The Foremans were residents of South Kingstown, Rhode Island, but specific details about his profession and personal background are limited in public records. Now, Jason had been playing outside with his older brother and friends before heading toward his house near the Peacedale Volunteer Fire Station. His house was only a short distance away, directly across from Woodmansey's. Around 3:30 p.m., Jason's mother, Joyce Foreman, heard his laughter through the open window. Tragically, that's the last time she'd ever hear her son's voice. As for Michael Woodmansey, his name is tied to one of the most disturbing crimes in Rhode Island's history. He was born on July 16, 1958, and he would be 16 years old in high school in South Kingstown when he commits the unthinkable. On May 18, 1975, Michael lured Jason Foreman, a neighbor, into his home and brutally stabbed him. For 7 years, Jason's disappearance remained a mystery until April 1982, when Woodmansey was questioned about a separate attack. He had lured Dale Sherman, a paperboy, into his house, offered him some alcohol, and attempted to strangle him. Sherman escaped, though, and reported the assault, leading police to Woodmansey. Now, during the investigation, officers suspected a connection to Jason's case. Under questioning, Woodmansey confessed to the murder. What the police uncovered next, though, was horrifying. A search of Woodmansey's room revealed Jason's skull and bones, meticulously cleaned and preserved with shellac, displayed on a dresser. Woodmansey also kept a journal, which he claimed was purely fictional, although the disturbing content suggested otherwise. In 1983, Woodmansey pled guilty to second-degree murder to avoid a trial and the Foremans from hearing the gruesome and painful details being made public. He was given 40 years in prison, but served only 28, benefiting from Rhode Island's good time law, which allows inmates to earn time off from their sentences for good behavior. However, in 2011, his impending release sparked outrage. Upon John Foreman learning that his son's killer, Michael Woodmansey, might be released early from prison, he expressed his profound grief and anger. In a radio interview, he said this:
I do intend, if this man is released anywhere in my vicinity or if I can find him after the fact, I do intend to kill this man.
The outrage and protest led to a psychiatric evaluation that deemed Michael Woodmansey fit for indefinite commitment, which he would voluntarily enter Eleanor Slater Hospital upon his release. And as of March 2021, it's unclear if Woodmansey is still in that facility. As privacy laws protect such information, the case has continued to haunt those who follow it, a grim reminder of the unimaginable horrors some, especially Woodmansey, are capable of committing. July 4th, 2012. In a bid to take their daughter away from the hands of Calvin Sneed, Barry Laprelle Gilton and Lupe Mercado took the law into their own hands and committed a heinous crime that changed the course of their lives forever. Barry Laprelle Gilton and Lupe Mercado had been together since high school, raising 4 children, 3 boys and a girl, while living in San Francisco, California. And though they never married, their bond seemed solid. Their daughter, whose name remains undisclosed for her protection, began showing alarming behavioral changes at the age of 17. She started staying out late, isolating herself. Worried, her parents decided to check her computer, and they found their worst fear. She was advertising herself as an escort through social media and online ads. Desperate to intervene, they sent her to her uncle in Los Angeles, hoping the distance would help. Instead, it got worse. She fell under the influence of Calvin Sneed, a 22-year-old pimp who coerced her into street prostitution and took pretty much all her earnings. Now, the girl's uncle reported her late-night activities to her parents, who then told the police with little evidence to act on, so they couldn't really intervene. They would try to get help from missing and exploited services, but that too failed. And despite her parents' attempts to get her away from Sneed, she kept returning to him. Now realizing they're out of options, Barry and Lupe take the matters into their own hands. On May 27, 2012, they waited along Vineland Avenue in North Hollywood, knowing Sneed's usual route. Armed with a 9mm handgun, Barry fires at Sneed, but misses. So now injured but unaware of who targeted him, Sneed made a fatal miscalculation by staying close to the family's orbit. On June 2, 2012, Sneed and the couple's daughter returned to San Francisco to visit Sneed's ailing family member. Now, since her parents weren't too far away, she decided to visit him and let him know that she was around, but would be staying with Sneed and his family in the area. It was the perfect opportunity to strike again, so the couple get another gun and trace their daughter down to Sneed's apartment. When they found out the location, they head back on the 4th of July to carry out that plan. Like a scene out of an action movie, the mother waits down the street, watching when Sneed would leave the apartment. At around 1:57, she calls Barry with the signal, and at 2 a.m. sharp, Barry drove a gray Mercedes-Benz SUV and mercilessly shoots Sneed dead right in front of the apartment. After the shots rang out, their daughter saw Sneed was dead, and she called the cops on him, and the couple were arrested. Now they're locked up on a $2 million bail bond and are yet to be convicted. But on the other hand, close friends of the couple believe this entire case doesn't make any sense. These were the same people who were victims and even had an open case with the police, yet they're now seen as suspects in a murder. In June 2012, Mercado and Gilton were arrested and charged with Calvin Sneed's murder under federal racketeering laws, with prosecutors alleging the crime furthered the Central Divisadero Playas gang's interest. In 2020, a jury acquitted him of murder. Barry was convicted of racketeering, while Mercado was found guilty as an accessory. Barry's motion for acquittal was granted, with the court ruling there was insufficient evidence for the racketeering conviction, which was subsequently dismissed. January 24, 2014, Miriam Rodriguez gets a phone call that changes her life and makes her name very popular. This moment led to her seeking justice on her own, defying all odds and confronting unimaginable dangers. It all began with a horrifying crime. A group of men armed with AK-47s and handguns drive through Tamaulipas, Mexico in a tinted glass truck. Spotting a young girl, Miriam's daughter, she tried to run, but they still caught up with her, and sadly the streets were empty, so no witnesses. It was just another day for the Zetas cartel. In 2014, the Los Zetas cartel was in a violent conflict with the Gulf cartel, a former business partner. And during that time, the municipality of San Fernando suffered greatly from this ongoing battle. Innocent civilians were killed, robberies and extortions became a daily reality, driven by the need to finance a war, spread fear, or in some other cases, for the sheer enjoyment of these criminal groups. Now, Miriam Rodriguez and her husband had been receiving a series of calls regarding ransom for the release of their 20-year-old daughter. With the hope of recovering her, they gathered that money and followed the instructions. After the initial payment, Miriam received more phone calls. "Give us more money, and we assure you we'll free your daughter." On March 23, 2014, Miriam's phone rang yet again. The voice requested $2,000, which she took and left near the health center in San Fernando, expecting her daughter's return. Days turned into weeks, and they would never see their daughter. Miriam began to lose hope, and as time passed, it's hard to stay calm when you just don't know if your daughter will return home. Until one day a friend assures her that her daughter Karen would never return, and that she was likely already dead. The reality sank in, along with her heart, realizing that her daughter was now gone forever. Devastated but determined, Miriam vowed to bring the perpetrators to justice. Her only clue, a nickname, Sama, the name she heard from one of the ransom calls. So she scoured through her daughter's Facebook and found a photo tagged with that name. It led her to this ice cream shop in Ciudad Victoria, and for weeks she observed, waiting for a chance to follow the man she suspected. When she finally discovered his address, Miriam disguised herself as a health worker to gather more information, building a case authorities could no longer ignore. After her tireless efforts, Sama was arrested. and his confession unraveled the cartel network involved in Karen's abduction and murder. Miriam's pursuit wouldn't stop here, though. She tracked and helped capture 10 of the individuals responsible. Her bravery turned her into a symbol of hope and resistance in San Fernando. But standing up to a cartel came at a cost. Tragically, on Mother's Day in 2017, Miriam was gunned down right outside her home. Her fight had ended, but her legacy lives on. Her story's a stark reminder of the resilience of a mother's love and the courage it takes to confront powerful criminals in a broken system. On April 18, 2008, in Culiacan, Sinaloa, Mexico, assassins from the Beltran Leyva cartel ambushed and killed the son of Sinaloa cartel leader and drug lord, LM1, and it drove him into a vengeful rampage as his notoriety would grow. Born February 28, 1958, in Cosala, Sinaloa, LM1 had close ties with Javier Torres Felix, LJT, and would rise within the Sinaloa cartel. He gained prominence in the 1990s, especially after his brother's arrest, overseeing drug transportation and working alongside Ovidio Guzman Lopez. Now, on the other hand, LJT maintained a close friendship and partnership with Ismael Zambada, a prominent figure in the Sinaloa cartel's hierarchy. LM1 grew up in an environment surrounded by firearms and narcotics due to that association. However, as he matured, he eventually entered the ranks of the Sinaloa cartel himself. On January 27, 2004, Javier was apprehended at his residence in San Miguel and subsequently extradited to the United States, facing charges related to drug trafficking. So with his brother's absence, LM1 was now entrusted with a critical responsibility, overseeing the transportation of cocaine from South America into the Mexican states of Chiapas and Oaxaca. That role was of utmost significance, elevating his standing within the cartel. Nonetheless, the prominence also made him a prime target for their arch-rivals, the BLO. Now, these adversaries took the responsibility of transforming LM1 from a typical drug dealer into a ruthless, murderous figure. April 18, 2008, near the Montebello residential district of Culiacan, right outside the health ministry, LM1's 20-year-old son, Torres Acosta, finds himself in a dire situation when a group of sicarios working for the Beltran Leyva cartel launch a surprise attack. Torres wasn't alone, accompanied by his sister Alondra and LM1's sister-in-law, Rivas Heredia. The sicarios would try to kidnap Torres Acosta, but he resisted, making him open fire and kill him on the spot. After the killing of Torres Acosta, the police found the escape vehicle used by the sicarios, and inside that car was the major thing that made LM1 lose his mind. The killers left a message implicating Los Zetas. In the days that followed, LM1 took a disturbing turn. He told his people to round up members of the BLO and Los Zetas, and then subjected them to unimaginable torture before ultimately executing them in cold blood. As a result of that, LM1 unleashed brutal violence, torturing and killing his rivals, including police commander Roberto Carlos Barcelo Villagran. That guy's back was mercilessly sliced with knives, his legs were severed, and he was beheaded while conscious, an appalling act that defies all human comprehension. His lifeless body, along with two others, were then disposed of in a trunk of this vehicle, and then LM1 sicarios would scatter those remains throughout Culiacan. Over 30 BLO members and hundreds of others fell victim to this ruthless vendetta, earning LM1 the nickname El Ondeado, the Crazy One. By 2011, LM1 was blacklisted under the U.S. Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act, and on October 13, 2012, LM1 was surrounded by Mexican federal forces, after which he was killed, attempting to escape. LM1 was laid to rest alongside his son, ending a very bloody chapter in cartel history.
It's full of mixed emotions right now, and this whole situation is very, very difficult.
In 2014, Daytona Beach, Florida resident Jason Browning was away, and his son was subjected to heinous acts by his 18-year-old babysitter, Raymond Frolander. Upon discovering the horrific scene, Browning would confront Frolander and left that young man battered and bruised. The chilling image of Frolander's face, captured in his mugshot, quickly spread online, and it would become a stark reminder of the consequences of such vile actions. Frolander opted for a plea bargain and pled guilty to the charge of molestation of a minor under the age of 12, delivering a swift and well-deserved verdict. The Florida court system gave him 25 years in prison. While Frolander was facing the consequences, Browning walked away unscathed. Despite the violent confrontation, authorities chose not to press charges against him, and Browning openly admitted that he would have probably done worse if his son hadn't intervened. Frolander remains incarcerated at the Volusia County Jail, awaiting his sentence. Coincidentally and sadly, Jason Browning was also sexually abused when he was 4 and is well aware of the circumstances. He can easily relate to his son's trauma and to its psychological effects because of his own past. Furthermore, he's also committed to helping and mentoring his son at this trying period. Browning wants to encourage other victims to come forward and seek assistance by sharing his personal experiences. Breaking the silence, in his opinion, is essential to ensuring future generations live in safety.